Hello everybody. Today in this session we are going to discuss on physiology of memory, which is not only an important topic but also an interesting one because so many researches are still going on in this field. So without wastage of time, let's start with the definition. So memory is the faculty of brain. Memory is the faculty of brain by which information or data, whatever you can say, is first encoded, then it will be stored in some part of the brain, and finally it will be retrieved. It will be retrieved as and when, as and when we will require. We will require of that data or information. So here three important facts of memory are the encoding part, then storage part, and finally the process of retrieval by which we can perform or we can tell or we can show our experience or our learning or our different types of memory. So with having this idea, let's go to the classification of memory. So memory can broadly classified into two heading. One is the long-term memory, and of course one is the short-term memory. This short-term memory can also be termed as sensory memory or the working memory. So sensory memory or working memory or the short-term memory all are synonym. Now long-term memory can be divided broadly into two types. One is the declarative memory. Declarative, also known as the explicit memory. Explicit memory. This is a type of memory where the facts or events that you know, you can describe it in a form of storytelling. So the facts or events that you can tell others is known as the declarative memory or the explicit memory. And what about the other part of the long-term memory? That is the non-declarative or the implicit memory. So here basically what happens, the facts and events that you know, you can show it by doing or by performing in front of others. So these are the different types of long-term memory. Now based on their definition, declarative memory can also be divided into two halves. One is the semantic memory. Semantic memory, also known as the facts. So here the facts can be described as a story or it can be episodic memory. Episodic memory. Here basically the events can be described. Events can be described. And in both of these two cases, they are basically stored in which part of the brain? At the medial temporal lobe, particularly at the hippocampus. So if MCQ will ask on this question that which part of the brain is responsible for storage of the long-term memory or the declarative memory or the explicit memory, or they can say what is the area for semantic memory or episodic memory, your answer will be the hippocampus. Now non-declarative memory can broadly divided into four types. One is the conceptual priming. So here the concepts are basically stored in part of the neocortex. So here neocortex is the responsible part. Next, whatever we know the procedure, so the procedural skill, that can be skills or our habits. So procedural memory, procedural type of memory can be habit or it can be skill. They are actually stored by the help of the basal ganglia. Now, next type of memory is the, under the non-declarative memory, is the non-associative learning. Non-associative learning. And this non-associative learning can be conditioned or operant type learning. They are actually stored with the help of the cerebellum and the skeletal musculature. And last part is the associative learning. It can also be divided into habituation, not habit. Here it is the habituation. So habituation and the sensitization. Sensitization. So habituation and sensitization are the two types of associative learning, which are basically controlled by the reflex pathway. But in this lecture, we will not be discussed on these two type of learning, that are the non-associative learning and associative learning, and they will be dealt in some other lecture where we will have detailed discussion on the learning, definition of the learning, types of learning, and the molecular mechanism of learning. Now, the short-term memory and the long-term memory are basically stored in the part of the hippocampus. So this hippocampus is the main site for the storage of the memory. And this hippocampus is basically a part of the Pfeffer's circuit. This circuitry basically deals with the formation and the storage part of the memory. So we should know the Pfeffer's circuit first. Pfeffer's circuit first. So what is the Pfeffer's circuit and what are its neural connection, that we have to understand. So we should start it from the hippocampus. Hippocampus first will send its signal to the amygdala, which is a part of the limbic cortex. Now, this hippocampus, again, it can send signal by the help of the fornix, which is part of the Pfeffer's circuit, into the mammillary body of the hypothalamus. So mammillary body of the hypothalamus will get signal from the hippocampus by the fornix, and rest of the hypothalamus, as there are other several nuclei apart from the mammillary body, which are also help to store in the memory formation and the storage formation of the memory in the hypothalamus. They actually get signal from the amygdala by the help of the stria terminalis. Stria terminalis. So rest of the hypothalamus will get its signal by the stria terminalis. Now, one thing can be happen, that mammillary body directly send its signal to the anterior nuclei of the thalamus. So thalamus anterior nuclei will get signal from the mammillary body via the mammillothalamic tract, and anterior nuclei of the thalamus send its signal to the cingulate gyrus. So that's how cingulate gyrus will receive the signal from the hippocampus. The other thing can be happened, that hypothalamus can directly send its signal to the prefrontal cortex also. Prefrontal cortex also, where memory can be stored. And also hippocampus has direct communication with the association cortex, with the association cortex. Association cortex. So from this circuitry, we can understand that hippocampus is the center of this Pepet circuit, and eventually memory can be stored not only in the cingulate gyrus but also in the prefrontal cortex as well as in the association cortex. Now we will be discuss on the mechanism of memory formation or molecular mechanism of memory formation. What is that? To understand the molecular mechanism of memory, we have to know few terminologies like the synaptic pruning, then synaptic plasticity. It can also be termed as neuroplasticity. And we have to understand the definition of long-term potentiation and long-term depression. Let's begin with the definition of synaptic pruning. It is the process of synapse elimination basically. It is nothing but the process of synaptic elimination. The process of synaptic elimination. Mainly in the developing brain. In the developing brain, that is shedding unnecessary connection. That is shedding unnecessary connection. So this is the definition of synaptic pruning, where you can define it as the process of synaptic elimination in the developing brain, not in the developed brain, but in the developing brain, that is shedding unnecessary connection. The beauty is that at birth, all parts of human brain is interconnected with each other. During first 2 years after birth, human brain undergoes the major lifelong process of this synaptic pruning. And this synaptic pruning are basically modulate its function with the help of three principles. So three principles of these synaptic prunings are: one is that use it or lose it. Second one is that neurons that fire together, wire together. And it will also follow the neural Darwinism. As we all know, the Darwin's theory, which states the survival of fittest. So exactly the same thing will happen in case of memory also, and in case of process of synaptic pruning also. And what do you mean by use it or lose it and the neurons that fire together or wire together? This means that the synapses that are frequently used have strong connection, while rarely used synapses are gradually eliminated. Synapses that are frequently used will have or will make strong bondage with each other, and those are not in use or those are rarely used synapses are gradually terminated or eliminated or destroyed in our brain. So this is all about our synaptic pruning. Next, the important definition regarding this part is that synaptic plasticity or the neuroplasticity. This synaptic plasticity or the neuroplasticity also will work in these two principles, that is the use it or lose it, and the neurons that fire together can wire together. So synaptic plasticity, which can also be termed as neuroplasticity. What is that? It is the ability of synapse to strengthen or weaken over time in response to increase or decrease in their activity. It is the ability of synapse, it is the ability of synapse to strengthen or weaken over time, to strengthen or weaken over time in response to increase or decrease in their activity. In response to increase or decrease in their activity. So this is the term of synaptic plasticity. Again, it is the ability of synapse to strengthen or weaken over time in response to increase or decrease in their activity, and they will also follow two principles. One is that use it or lose it, and another one is neurons that fire together, wired together. Okay, now what is the definition of long-term potentiation? An enduring, long-lasting increase in synaptic efficacy following a high-frequency tetanic stimulation of a afferent fiber or from the afferent fibers. And enduring or long-lasting increase in synaptic efficacy, increase in synaptic efficacy following a high frequency, which is known as tetanic stimulation of afferent fiber. Following a high frequency, which is also known as the tetanic stimulation of afferent fibers, which carry the sensory signals, afferent nerve fibers. What do you mean by long-term depression? An enduring decrease in synaptic efficacy following low frequency stimulation of afferent impulse. Here is the enduring, here enduring increase, here enduring long-lasting decrease, and enduring exactly the opposite thing, enduring decrease in synaptic efficacy following a low frequency. Here it was high frequency, here it was low frequency or tetanic stimulation. It is not tetanic stimulation, here low frequency stimulation of afferent fibers, low frequency stimulation or slow frequency stimulation of afferent nerve fibers. And this long-term potentiation will be modulated in the hippocampus as well as by the help of FH circuit and ultimately stored in the cerebral cortex. And this long-term depression is mainly controlled or under control of our cerebellum. So this is the basic difference between this long-term potentiation and long-term depression. But under both these circumstances, our memory can be formed. So from this way, we can understand that our cerebellum also has role to form the memory. Now, to understand this molecular mechanism of memory, we have to know a few structure of the hippocampus. Let's start with that. This is the hippocampus, almost hippocampal structure. Here, important connections are in the part of the subiculum. There is a neuron. In the part of the cerebral cortex, it is the pyramidal cell which intercommunicate with the other pyramidal cell. This pyramidal cell is known as the CA1 and it is known as the CA3, and this axon part is known as the Schaffer's collateral. Schaffer's collateral. Now, what happens? The information or the long-term potentiation molecular mechanism of the memory is widely studied in these synapses mainly. So this synapse between the CA3 signal will travel from the CA3. This is the CA3 nerve terminal and will send its signal to the CA1. So in this site, the long-term potentiation is widely studied. So what is that? Suppose this is the nerve terminal of CA1 where lots of glutamate neurotransmitter is present in the vesicle at the nerve terminals, which are about to expel from the terminal or knob, and eventually it will go in this postsynaptic site, that is the CA1. Sorry, here it is the CA3. From here to here, the signal will transmit. Now, in the synaptic cleft, there are several lots of sodium ion, calcium ion, sodium ions are there. In the postsynaptic cell body, in the CA1 neuron, we have two receptors. One is the AMPA, which is known as the AMPA receptor, AMPA receptor, and one is the NMDA receptor. Here it is the NMDA receptor. NMDA 2A subunit. Now, both the AMPA receptor and NMDA receptor will have the permeability for sodium ion, but only the NMDA receptor will have the capacity for permeability of the calcium ion. But the thing is that under normal circumstances, this channel is closed by the magnesium ion. So presence of magnesium ion, the calcium ion cannot be entered under normal circumstances. Now what happens? As the action potential will traverse through the CA3 neuron, it will eventually come into the nerve terminal and via the exocytosis process, this glutamate will come into the synaptic cleft. Now, immediately what it can be do, it can do the attachment with the AMPA receptor. It can make its attachment with the AMPA receptor, and as a result of this, the gate will be opened by which sodium ion can easily be entered. Now, if the action potential frequency is less, or it is not massive action potential, or if it is not tetanic type stimulation, then less amount of sodium ion will be present, and that will not be able to dislodge the magnesium ion. But if there will be tetanic stimulation or high frequency stimulation, then lots of glutamate will be exocytosed, and as a result of this, several AMPA receptors present at the postsynaptic site, it will be activated, and as a result of this, so many sodium ion can be entered first. So entry of the sodium ion will make the cell depolarize, and after this depolarization, it will propagate its action potential to the NMDA receptor, and NMDA receptor we will have magnesium ion. By the electrostatic repulsion mechanism, this magnesium ion will be dislodged. So this is known as the electrostatic repulsion process, by which the lots of sodium ion will make its magnesium ion dislodged from the NMDA type 2A subunit receptor, and as a result of this, calcium ion can easily be entered through this NMDA receptor. So ultimately, calcium ion will reach at the postsynaptic site. Now, after that, what will happen? At the postsynaptic cell body, when calcium will present, it will actually react with the calmodulin, and it will produce what? CAM kinase 2 enzyme. So activation of CAM kinase 2 enzyme can be done by the excessive entry of the calcium ion, and when it will react with the calmodulin to make, first is calcium calmodulin complex, and this calcium calmodulin complex will ultimately activate this CAM kinase 2 enzyme. What it can be done? What's its function? Here, first, CAM kinase 2 will help to increase secretion of other neurotransmitter like nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, or the endocannabinoids from the presynaptic nerve terminals, that is the CA3 nerve terminals, and eventually it will help to phosphorylate the AMPA receptor. So AMPA receptor phosphorylation will be done by retrograde secretion of this nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, and endocannabinoids by the help of CAM kinase 2. On the other side, this CAM kinase 2 also help to insert lots of AMPA receptor at the postsynaptic cell membrane, so that so many sodium ion will be entered. So lots of AMPA receptor from the cytoplasmic site of the postsynaptic cell body, it will be attached, or it will be tagged at the cell membrane by the help of the CAM kinase 2 enzyme, and thus there will be increased AMPA receptor conductance, and as a result of these two things, there will be increased AMPA receptor conductance, increase AMPA receptor conductance. So again, when the tetanic stimulation will traverse through the presynaptic axon and eventually enter into the presynaptic nerve terminal of the CA3 neuron, they actually help to excrete glutamate neurotransmitter from the synaptic vesicles here, and this glutamate first attached with the AMPA receptor here, and they will get activated. Afterwards, sodium ion can easily be entered through the AMPA receptor. If the stimulation will be so strong that so many sodium ion can be entered into the postsynaptic cell, they eventually make massive depolarization of the cell at the postsynaptic CA1 neuron, and via the propagative transmission, this action potential will travel to the NMDA2A subunit, and eventually it will be activated, not only with the help of the glutamate but also the influxed sodium ion present in the postsynaptic cell body, and this sodium ion will expel the magnesium ion which is present in the NMDA receptor by the process known as electrostatic repulsion. So electrostatic repulsion is the mechanism by which magnesium ion will be dislodged from the NMDA receptor, and that will help to entry of the calcium ion in the postsynaptic cell body. Now, after entrance of the postsynaptic cell body calcium ion, it will immediately make its reaction with the calmodulin present in the postsynaptic cell body and produce calcium calmodulin complex. This calcium calmodulin complex ultimately activate this CAM kinase 2 enzyme. Now, this CAM kinase 2 enzyme will have two actions. One, it will actually help to secrete nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, endocannabinoids type neurotransmitter secretion from the CA3 neuron presynaptic nerve terminals, so that it can make phosphorylation. It can make phosphorylation of the AMPA receptor, so that so many sodium ion can be entered. On the other side, CAM kinase 2 enzyme also further tagged or attached lots of AMPA receptor, bringing it from the postsynaptic cytoplasmic site into the cell membrane. And as a result of these two processes, there will be finally increased AMPA receptor conductance, and thus the early phase of the long-term potentiation will be completed. So this is the early phase of the long-term potentiation. Here, one thing you have to remember that no protein are basically synthesized in this early phase. Now go to the late phase of the LTP. So late phase LTP will start from which sites? Late phase LTP. Here the NMDA receptor, then AMPA receptor, and the metabotropic glutamate receptor. These three receptors will have action, and they are basically present in which site of the brain? These sites are dorsal horn neuron and the hippocampal neuron. Easy to remember, only you can remember the thing that is the hippocampus. So they are basically occur in the hippocampus. So within the hippocampus, after the early phase of LTP, there will be activated NMDA receptor, activated AMPA receptor, and activated metabotropic glutamate receptor. All these activated receptor together will do what? They will activate several intra-signaling pathways like phosphoinositide 3 kinase pathway, then protein kinase A phosphorylation pathway, then protein kinase C phosphorylation pathway, protein kinase C phosphorylation pathway, and also the CAM kinase 2 pathway, CAM kinase 2 pathway. Via the intracellular signaling mechanism like RAS formation, then RAF formation, then MEC, REC. These are the intracellular signaling mechanism. Then MAP kinase pathway. No need to go in detail of these pathways. And eventually it will produce CRAB, cyclic AMP responsive element binding protein. Cyclic AMP responsive element binding protein. This CRAB1 and CRAB2 will produce. And finally, via the signaling protein, cytoskeletal protein, and nuclear protein formation, they will ultimately express the gene. So gene expression will be done. Further, this gene expression and translation process, important proteins will be synthesized, like the brain derived natriuretic factors, then PSD, postsynaptic density 95, then ARC, then EGF, epidermal growth factor, EGF1, then CFOS are the proteins. These are the proteins. They are actually formed by this process, intracellular signaling mechanism, in the late phase of LTP, and ultimately get storage in the prefrontal cortex, as well as in the cingulate gyrus, and in the association cortex, which are the part of the Peyfast circuit. So ultimately, the memory will be stored after forming these proteins into the several parts of the brain. And as and when we will require this thing, they are actually retrieved. So this is the all about our molecular mechanism of memory. Now, a little bit about the long-term depression. So long-term depression are basically facilitated by the help of the cerebellum. As we know, there are two types of fibers. One is the parallel fiber and one is the mossy fiber. So parallel fiber and mossy fiber and the other parts of the cerebellum ultimately will make our short-term memory into the long-term memory. So here the important structure is the cerebellum. Here also the proteins are synthesized, and these proteins are basically stored in the cerebellum. So they are actually also known as the muscle memory. Suppose as in our childhood, if we learn how to ride bicycle, we never forget to ride this bicycle in any parts of the life, so until and unless there will be cerebellar lesion. So muscle memory will be formed with the help of this cerebellum. So this is all about our memory and classification of memory and the molecular mechanism of memory. Hope you will learn a new thing from this tutorial session.